What do you get when you come across a man who's written a book on business plateaus, works in corporate America, helps Main Street businesses? You get Patrick Lee, my guest on today's show, the founder of Chesapeake FinTech. On today's podcast, we break down business concepts, understand why businesses experience growth and maintain cycles, and what growth actually looks like to Patrick, and what businesses need to do in order to get through those growth plateaus. This was another business masterclass. We've had so many of these recently. I'm sure you're going to enjoy this podcast. As entrepreneurs, we all experience challenges in our business journey. I'm Joe Testori, and the Grappling Growth podcast is my attempt at documenting my entrepreneurial journey while building my brands. I sit down with fellow entrepreneurs, understanding how they grapple with growth. I hope you find value and enjoy. Patrick, welcome onto the show.
Thank you, Joe, for having me.
You're welcome. Patrick, I'm curious, what does growth look like to you?
So growth is one of those words that we need to take a moment and talk about, because it's a key piece of what I help business owners and leaders figure out is what is growth. And so one of the things that matters a lot is I go in and talk to owners, and I'd say 90% of them claim they're a growth business, and none of them think they're a lifestyle business. And when we're done talking, probably 90% of lifestyle business, only 10 growth. What I would define growth as is a continuous changing of systems to continually get 10, 25, 50, 100% growth, right? Or if you're looking at it not as a money piece, but as growth, personal growth or growth in any form, I'm looking at it as you're continuously finding new things to learn. It's always a challenge. You're always moving.
Mm-hmm. I love that definition and your thinking on growth there. With that in mind, why do you think most businesses get stuck in plateaus?
They get stuck in plateaus because they believe they should be trying to grow. So they continually are trying new initiatives. They're using resources, putting them in the business. But what they don't realize is that they're going to have to change their systems entirely in order to actually grow. So they're sort of wasting resources and effort and energy in what they consider to be growth, when in reality, they're in a maintenance type position and they're wasting resources pretending to grow without knowing here's what we'd have to do to actually create capacity.
Mm-hmm. That's super interesting. I remember looking at growth and maintain cycles within businesses. And as you said, I speak to a lot of business owners who everyone wants to grow their business that I talk to. You might get 1% of people who don't want to grow their business. Maybe they're near retirement or they're super happy with their lifestyle. But generally, if you speak to 100 business owners, I would guess 99 out of 100 would say they would like to grow their business if there was a choice. But and this is something that I've battled with or grappled with at times, is I'm not working on the right inputs to grow my business. Therefore, we hit plateaus and we're not achieving the numbers or levels or getting to the levels that we want to get to. So if you were to sit down face to face with a business owner who said, I'm not growing at the rate that I want to get to, I want to be growing at 20% year on year growth, I'm doing $500,000, so it's someone in Main Street, what would you advise to someone there? What would be the first things that you look to unpack?
So the first thing we're going to unpack is mindset of that business owner, because the truth of the matter is most folks, they say they want to grow, but they actually want to protect what they have. And if you're not willing to truly, it's John Collins' Good to Great, right? If you're not willing to bust some things up in order to create new methods, new systems, new markets, and so on, if you can't take that risk, you're not really going to put yourself in a position to grow. So really, growth, or we just all been trained as entrepreneurs to constantly say we want to grow, we want to grow, we want to grow, but maybe we don't.
So with that, and I've taken a few programs now and I've created my own program. Every program that I've gone into, and even my own, and I guess I've emulated what those ahead of me have done, first thing we look at is mindset. Why do you think getting your mindset in order is the foundation, the starting block for growth?
I think because Look, if we're going to give growth a specific quick definition, I'm going to say it's taking advantage of the opportunities with intent to achieve a specific purpose. That means that owner has to have their mindset lined up to, number one, have a specific purpose, identify it beforehand, know what we're chasing. When opportunity presents itself, they have intent that it's going to get them there. What falls in their lap is the opportunity, and they chase it regardless if it's taking them towards that specific goal or not. So if we can get the owner's mindset aligned and we can get them focused, they can thread the eye of the needle and actually hit that purpose.
So that's an interesting definition of growth that I haven't heard before. Are you familiar with the literature from Dan Sullivan, more namely one of his books, 10x is easier than 2x?
Strategic coach, yeah.
He, in his book there, I think one point that you well put together that he talks about in his concepts is quite often people are chasing shiny objects or they're chasing the low hanging fruits and they have the goals to scale their business, but the actions they're taking daily or the opportunities that they're chasing are absolutely not the opportunities that are going to get them to the goal. It's like if you've got a fitness trainer, if a personal trainer is only billing out his time, the only thing, and he's saying I can only work 40 hours a week, the best he can ever make is, let's just say, $100 an hour. He can then look to increase his prices. But in that vehicle, by himself solely, he's never going to be able to have a $500,000 a year business because he's restrained by his resources. And you see some fantastic guys out there, guys like, I'm not too sure if you're familiar with James Smith. He's quite a fitness trainer in the UK. He's gone into various different business avenues right now. But he talks about this is you're confined by the parameters and the market that you're operating in, and sometimes it takes stepping back, maybe digitizing that business, doing something online which isn't hinged on your time. It's based off of your knowledge, your resources, and tech, and then building up that way. And it's the puzzle that I see. It's the dichotomy that I see a lot of people sole own operated businesses get stuck in. Is that something that you see with clients that you work with and businesses?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think we're very generous with the definition of a business owner, right? I think we look at anybody who's controlling a book of business and we call them a business owner. We have the term solopreneur. We're looking at folks who have a virtual assistant and a couple of part-time people, and we're saying they own a business. A lot of times, they're a practitioner of some particular industry or skill set up around them. And I think the difference between that and a business owner, because the business owner is thinking, how do I scale, right? How do I have people who can do what I can do? How do I have multiple offices? How do I maximize resources and staff and grow? And I think we get stuck in is what we're doing. We bought our own job, right? We know how to do this, so we'd like to own our calendar and do it as a practitioner versus take on the challenge of what it means to be a business owner.
So, in your opinion, at what point does someone go from, and you please correct me on the definition, when does someone go from a business owner to an entrepreneur or solopreneur to a business owner?
I think the reality is when you begin to figure out how the resources and structure can function without you, right? If that redundancy exists, if you could step away from the business and it continue to run, you have a business. If that business requires your resources, energy, attention all the time, you probably are a practitioner. You might be running a business very inefficiently, but you're somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that thinking. I was talking to someone recently, very similar concept to what you were talking about, and it's looking at, does the business work when you remove yourself? And every so often, and I did this test about 3 weeks ago. I was in Ibiza for 5 days with friends. I deleted my Slack, I deleted my emails, and for me, that was a test for this year to see how well is the business functioning. Because if I cannot take 5 days away from the business, then I don't have a business. As you said, I am a owner operated business that once you remove me from the machine or the system, that's it, it breaks. And I see so many entrepreneurs that once they step away, or they can't step away, first off, when they step away, they lose money. They might be in person practitioners that they don't have the trusted cover to look after the business while they're away, or they don't have things in place. And I call it a glorified uh, freelance, or you're just self employed.
Yeah, and I think that's the best word for it is actually self-employed. I like to use practitioner to try to make that, but there's a lot of folks who leave corporate America or corporations anywhere, right? And they go out, they hang their shingle, and they say, "I have a business." I'm like, not really. I think essentially what you've done is you've become self-employed doing the same thing. I think that's the gig economy too, right? Like all the 1099s that companies start using because it just benefits them in some way. But the people on the other end behave like employees who just happen to be 1099s.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. And I see it time and again. And it's a bit of a honey trap. People leave their job to then do stuff for themselves, and then they have 10 clients, and so therefore they've got 10 bosses. And I've seen it with friends who they are self-employed. They're not business owners, and that's me trying to be as candid as possible. But they become self-employed, and then they glue to their phone. They're getting messages at 10 o'clock at night for someone who wants to book time in with them, and they're so reactive to their time. And I think there's a small shelf life on that. Or people get to the point where they start to despise the operations and the work they're doing, and they put so much precedence on my client this, and I have to respond to my client, and I have to do this. But they basically become the employee, for lack of better terms, of these clients because they don't have the control, the delegation, the autonomy, the processes, fundamentally processes and systems. If you don't have them, I don't see how you can comfortably scale your business in place. So it's some very interesting concepts and topics that you spoke about there. Patrick, I'm curious, if you could go back to your 20-year-old self, what's one golden rule of advice for business you'd give to 20-year-old Patrick?
I would say, this one's easy, by the way. I would say, stop chasing perfection and keep moving.
So strip that down a little bit for me. What do you mean? Like what does perfection look like to you, and what do you mean by keep on moving? I kind of get what you mean, but I'm still curious as to that answer.
So I'll give one example of something that I did. I had a company that I started up, and we were planning on disrupting the masonry accessory industry. And so we went to a huge show in Vegas called the World of Concrete, which is as boring as it sounds. And millions of people deal, and we're in one little section of the masonry section of this show, and we want to get attention. So we designed a 20 by 20 booth with all sorts of intricate things. We had a little seating area where we could talk to about 10 people and make a presentation. We had panels that were laid up. We had a huge booth where a very interesting and odd video was showing up on the screen, and it could be seen for, yards and yards and yards and yards and yards, all the way at the other end of one of those giant buildings in Vegas, right? So people were like, "What is that?" And they would come to us. And I spent a ton of money on this booth, a ton of money on the whole presentation, and I was perfecting every little piece of it. And in hindsight, I could have achieved the exact same thing with far less time, far less money, and gotten the notice from just one of those elements, not all 20 of the elements that we put into that booth and did, right? So I was always fixated on how far could I go? How cool could this be? How much disruption could I do? So it's like, I want perfection may not be the exact right word, but it was always as far as you could go, even if it was far past the point at which you'd actually achieve what you were trying to do.
Mm, I uh, I get what you mean now. I'm curious about the platinum rule. that you speak about. So you talk about this concept, looking at or meeting people where they are, not where you want them to be. Curious, how does that actually play out in real life?
So this is an interesting one. I mean, there's a book called The Platinum Rule, which talks about this. So this is not my idea. And a lot of times, if you're into temperament, Myers Briggs, any of those type of things, they're also sort of preaching this platinum rule. But the concept is, the golden rule is treat others as you'd like to be treated, right? But that's presumptuous that others have the same motivations you have, they want the same things you want, not in a manipulative way. It's meant to make them comfortable and allow them to be heard where they need to be heard.
Mm-hmm. Got you. Interesting. That's I remember doing some research before, and that was a theme, a concept that you spoke about times. And I think one golden piece of advice that I got before was stop expecting. And as you're saying, talking about the golden rule, but it's trying to speak the other person's language, and we all speak different languages, and sometimes, typically, our friends we speak the same language with. That's why we click. That's why we can do things with them. But there's so many other people out there that we can't communicate with, and I don't mean through language, but I mean just difference of worldviews. And I think it's important to understand that it takes different types of nuances and idiosyncrasies to communicate to those people.
Yeah, I think the most important thing for everybody to understand is motivations. We all like to assume that how we make decisions is based on logic or gut or whatever. But the truth of the matter is, we make decisions, we make friends, we communicate well when we're filling our motivations. So we're making a decision. If it meets our main few motivators in our lives, if it doesn't fill that motivator, we're likely not to make the decision and then say, rationalize the facts around it so we can say, well, we didn't make that decision because of X, Y, and Z. Well, those motivations also are how we click with other people. If they have similar motivations and all we sync, when they don't, we don't. So to me, motivators are the key, and determining what other people know and what they're about, even in a social setting, right? Are they about telling their story? Are they about blending into the background? Do they like excitement and, they're seeking attention? Do they like adventure? Are they more reserved? Like, those are actually filling motivators.
So, swinging the podcast a little bit over to growth and your own personal business growth. We've spoken about plateaus and rules that we can follow. Most consultancies rely on referrals and their relationships, what they've previously done. And a lot of people that I've seen, they've gone from being practitioners to then being self-employed, then expanding their businesses. Most just get to the point where they go from being in corporate America to then self-employed. How do you currently think about generating new deal flows for the business, and how is the pipeline structured? Is it a case of building and working on relationships and referrals, or is it a case of you guys? Do you have a solid outbound sales funnel, for instance, in place?
So that's a really interesting question, because we have just started grappling with the fact that my business has been almost entirely based on referrals, and we're in a growth mode. And in order to grow, we need to start putting out messaging and having some inbound sales start. So we just started really working in that direction. And I'm blessed to have some really good people on my staff who know how to do outreach and know how to put messaging out there. So that is currently what we're chasing. And I'll tell you, this whole piece of integrating AI into our messaging, our delivery, our process has been one of the innovations that I think will seriously help us grow.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's quite a common answer from guests who are in the consulting space. They come on here and they say that they've got their business to a very healthy level based off of their reputation, relationships, and that organically comes through referrals. But there is that a situation where they're looking at. I love the military saying, two is one and one is none, which means if something was to be obliterated tomorrow, you want to have something else to fall
Yeah.
back on. You don't just want to be going to war with AK-47s. You want to make sure you've got the tanks in the background and you've got the RPGs or whatever ammunition you have there. So for you, what has made you at this point in time say, actually, let's take a step back. It's amazing what we've achieved so far. We're at a good level. Now we want to look at these other avenues to grow. And why is AI so important in assisting your growth right now? Why is the time right for you to use it and look at additional sources to essentially fill up the well?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is when you're a small staff and you all sort of know your roles, you play this game of, do you stay in your silos or do you try to become sort of a jack of all trades? And I find the jack of all trades mindset to be an actual inhibitor to business and the personal growth. So using AI almost as your jack of all trades, right? Like organizing through AI, keeping things on a path, making sure everything is efficiently laid out. That's super helpful. Biggest thing is messaging. When I'm speaking, I get a lot of folks coming up wanting to interact, talk, but now I've got to do something with that. And I know my weaknesses. Follow up is not necessarily my best thing, right? I like the speaking, I like the relational piece, but how are we going to capture this? What are the next steps? How are we going to put somebody into an actual process? And AI is super helpful with that. And I don't have to either add a bunch of extra staff or divert my current staff from what they're actually good at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think AI just gives non-tech people or the people who want to think and work and operate smarter, not harder, the opportunity to be those strategists and then piece everything together in a much more uh, concentrated fashion as opposed to previously you would have had to think of really long convoluted messages. Is everything here said? You can get
Yeah.
that feedback, that critique. There's loads of elements that get pieced in together, and then they give you the rapid response feedback. And I remember reading, I was doing some research on AI yesterday because we're an AI consultancy, so it's kind of my job to do so. But it was saying that all the advancements in artificial intelligence over the next 10 years, it's expected that it's going to make the overall workforce and businesses 40% more productive, which just means more productivity means fundamentally better profit margins. It's probably going to reduce the cost to get products and services to the end users and customers, therefore creating more surplus share in the economy, so to speak. And it just means that businesses are going to become more efficient. So it sounds as though 80% of entrepreneurs are on that bandwagon already. You get a few resistant people, but generally we're trotting in that direction. How for you do you not compromise diluting your brand, your offering? Naturally, your time and skill set is finite. Is it when you work with clients, do you keep it very lean in the sense of uh, what you do is boutique and you work with every client, or you've built the systems and processes in place so you can delegate team members to clients specifically and you don't need to get involved?
So what I end up being essential for is strategy and communication. Um, my staff is built to be great project managers, to be great with people, to be able to take a strategy and a plan and drive it forward. And they have different skill sets in which they do this, but I can involve myself in almost everything. Like I will sit and I will pay attention and I will want to tweak this. And if you show me an email, I'm going to edit it, right? If you give me what you're going to do, I'm going to have a suggestion. But if you don't come to me and you go do what you're going to do, I'm not going to follow around behind you, right? So if you ask, you're going to get a response, but I know where I'm essential. and that is the strategy. I'm good at innovation. I'm gonna figure that out, and I'm good at communicating that to the client. I understand their fears, their risk tolerance. Um, I understand how they're feeling, so I can communicate well. I can plan well. But beyond that, the business doesn't need me. Let the people who can do it do it.
So what I'm hearing you're saying is you can give the sketch to the 1,000 piece puzzle, and then it's the responsibility, the delegation of your team to then go in and actually put those pieces in that puzzle, and you've got the trust in them to actually go there and figure out what it's going to look like and where the pieces go.
Yeah, I've been blessed with being a good delegator because the details actually bore me. So it's really easy for me to build something and say, "Hey, I don't want to keep messing with this anymore. Go ahead."
Yeah, and I think that's such a valuable lesson for a lot of entrepreneurs to take, because so often I see really talented people get caught up in areas of their business that isn't their domain expertise. So they're trying to do something that maybe they're only a 4 out of 10 in. But I was guested on a podcast yesterday, and on that podcast we were talking about finance. And with finance, I believe that's the first functionality as a business owner you should look to outsource, because it's the risk versus reward to be a 4 out of 10 performer in finance is so costly that if you get it wrong, get your taxes wrong, get your VAT wrong, payroll messed up, all of these elements, that if you had someone there to take care of all of that, an accountant, a finance director, then you're very well looked after. And I think a lot of people get into this perpetual state where they're consistently looking at where they can cut corners to save pennies as opposed to making pounds. Patrick, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Joe.